Good evening, Purple family. Welcome to another episode of Shades of Purple, a Prince podcast. On tonight's episode, I'm going to be looking at the lyrics to the song All the Critics Love You in New York. And I'm just going to give my interpretation of what the lyrics might mean, and in particular, the lyric about November 4th. We need a purple high. And that lyric is particularly personal to me because November 4th is my actual birthday. And so when I first heard this song, I was just like, wow, that's my connection, my personal connection to Prince. And so I want to kind of investigate just briefly what I found online about that particular date and why Prince may have chosen it. But just to be honest, though, it's just really a complete mystery. I didn't really find much about it. And as we know, Prince was very, very mysterious, as always, about his meaning behind things. He had his own interpretation about numbers and things like that and dates. So it could have really meant anything. But I do know that one fun fact about November 4th, Prince related, is November 4th, 1984 was the very first date of the Purple Rain tour. So when I turned 1 year old back in 1984, he got on stage with the Revolution to kick off the Purple Rain tour at the Joe Louis Arena in Detroit, Michigan. So outside of that, now, of course, Purple Rain was the album after the 1999 album. So I don't know if Prince really had the foresight to know for sure that he was going to be kicking off the Purple Rain tour on that date because, of course, he made the song All the Critics Love You in New York way before anything was thought about on Purple Rain, obviously. So that begs to differ. Okay, so what does We Need a Purple High mean? And so I thought maybe he was referring back to a then unreleased song called Purple Music. Of course, it has been released now. They released it on the Super Deluxe Edition for the 1999 album. In Purple Music, he talks about being on a purple high. You know, he says, I don't need no reefer, don't need no cocaine. All I need is, it's all the same as music on my brain. I'm so high. You know, I'm kind of jacking up the lyrics a little bit, but that's basically what he says in Purple Music. And so that made me think, well, maybe he's kind of referring back to that song and being high off of creating, his music because that was his everything. Like he said before, his songs were like his children. And so creating this music put him on a natural high. And so maybe he was recording. I have to go back and look. I haven't read the Sign of the Times by Dwayne Tudor. I haven't read that big book, but I did read the one where he did the Purple Rain era. So I might have to go back and look. Did he record All the Critics Love You in New York on November 4th? Now, I do know that it was released as a single on November 4th, 1983, the day I was born in the UK. No, wait a minute. No, not All the Critics. Little Red Corvette, I think, was released as a single in the UK, reissued as a single on the day that I was born. So once again, but Little Red Corvette and All the Critics Love You in New York really don't have anything in common outside of just being on the same album. And if I'm being completely honest about All the Critics Love You in New York, it's just one of those songs that I really don't pay a whole lot of attention to. It was kind of to me one of the weaker songs on the album. But like I said, that's just me, in my opinion. It was one of those songs that, it was a nice little song for what it was, but I didn't really, I was just like, I don't want to say it was a skip song necessarily, but it was just a song that I would listen to, but I don't know if I would necessarily go back and listen to it again. Let's get into the lyrics though. So you can dance if you want to. All the critics love you in New York. You don't have to keep up the beat. They'll still think it's neat. And so I think that he may have been talking about, the laid back kind of liberal lifestyle that they have on the East Coast and the West Coast for that matter. But New York being kind of the older area of the country, because of course New York was one of the original 13 colonies. And it used to be New Amsterdam, because the Dutch had, kind of situated in that area And so it was called New Amsterdam, and then they changed it to New York at some point. And that was just an area of where, people are just, kind of doing their own thing, living by, as Sheila E. would say, the beat of their own drum. And, you could, like he says in the next line, you can wear what you want to. It doesn't matter in New York. You can cut off all your hair. I don't think they care because they have a very individualistic type of culture in New York. And that still exists to this very day in New York, I believe, as well. It's like, hey, do your own thing. You don't have to, be like everybody else. You can stand out. And I think for Prince, I think that's kind of what helped him early in his career. And I think New York was one of those places that really embraced Prince early on when he played at places like the Roxy, uh, where people like the Rolling Stones saw him at. Mick Jagger in particular was an early Prince fan, and I think that they appreciated how different he was. That he didn't, he wasn't trying to be like this R&B crooner, that people, would see all the time. He was just being, he was Prince. He wanted to be himself completely. And like he told the record execs, don't make me black. I'm not trying to be like other black artists. Not to say that he was trying to not, like that he had a problem with being black. No, he just did not want to be pigeonholed like a lot of black artists were back then. Like if you were a black artist, you were basically R&B, back then. And he could, he had a beautiful falsetto and he could sing R&B, but he did not want to be trapped in just doing R&B music. He wanted to do rock. He wanted to do funk. He wanted to do what he wanted to do. And so New York was a place that allowed Prince to do just that, to be himself. And so I think that he really enjoyed New York and just being in that atmosphere for that reason, because he was allowed to be himself. And then there was no critics, or the critics that were there, they loved you because you were like them. You wanted to be your own boss, do your own thing, and they loved it. So he says, why you can play what you want to. All the critics love you in New York. They won't say that you're naive if you play what you believe. Yeah, because it's about what you want to do. It's not about what people think. You don't worry about what people think. And that's another reason why I became such a Prince fan. It's because I saw that he didn't really give a fuck what people thought about him, how he looked, how he sang, how he, how anything. It's just like you like him or you don't. Prince was one of those polarizing musical figures where either you really dug his music or you really didn't. It was never, oh, I kind of like him a little bit. No, you either liked Prince or you didn't. And I think that's still the case to this day. So back then, you either liked him or you didn't. And then New York was one of those places where they're not, so-called, they're not as hospitable as say, like I live in the South and we're all about hospitality. We speak to strangers on the street all the time. In New York, they really don't have a culture where they do that a whole lot, from what I understand. And, if you try to just talk to someone on the street, they're going to probably look at you like, what? Like, I don't know you, like, whatever. But so they just like, hey, you do you, I do me. And, we'll just keep it like that. So in the next line, he was like, the reason that you're cool is because you're from the old school and they know it. And so what he was saying, that there was a lot of maybe artists in the entertainment industry that really kind of appreciated the type of thing that Prince was doing. And even though they would butt heads, I think that one of those artists that kind of appreciated where Prince was coming from musically was Rick James. I mean, he did invite him onto his Fired Up tour in the spring of 1980. And though, like I said, they did end up butting heads, I do think that Rick James recognized maybe even himself a little bit in Prince. And so he was willing to embrace him. And he would, even say, even though of course, they fell out and all that, but he would say that he did appreciate Prince's funk, his music savvy, basically. He understand that, Prince was funky, and people in Rick James' band said as much. They thought that, that Prince was very talented, very funky, and they liked what he had going on. But at one point, Rick may have been, a little jealous, but it is what it is. He still had that initial appreciation for Prince. So All the critics love you in New York. You can dance if you want to. All the critics love you in New York. And then, he repeats the same, all the critics love you in New York. And so finally he comes to the line and says, it's time for a new direction. It's time for jazz to die. 4th day of November, we need a purple high. And so when I look at this stanza, I'm like, okay, he's saying that we need to go in a new direction musically and that it's time for jazz, which jazz at this point had been around for close to 40, 50 years because it came out in the early 20th century, so it had been out probably longer than that. So I would say jazz had been around probably, this is what, the 80s, so probably about 70, 80 years at this point. And jazz is still around, of course, to this day. But, it's time to, maybe look, like you said, in a new direction, get away from some of the old music and try, and listen to some new stuff, get hip to some new stuff. And he would later talk about hippies later on in the song. And so saying, hippies, take a bath, hippie, and all this type of stuff. So he was wanting that hippie culture to kind of get with a new groove, I guess you could say. And like I said, the 4th day of November, we need a purple high. I think that might be referring to, like I said, his other song, Purple Music. But when I looked it up, 4th day of November, other than the Joe Louis Arena performance for Purple Rain, which that was in 84 after the song was recorded, there was nothing else that stood out about that particular day. A lot of people on Prince.org and on Reddit theorized that maybe he was referring to November 4th, 1980, which was the presidential election. And of course, we had a president election that just happened last week. So maybe that's what people were kind of thinking and referring to, because the presidential election that we have every 4 years happens on the first Tuesday of the month of November. So maybe he was referring to that election, and that was the election that elected Ronald Reagan. And in the song Ronnie Talked to Russia, what was on the Controversy album, he does refer to Ronald Reagan. So maybe there's something with that, but I don't think so. I don't really see a connection with November 4th with that. But that was just what some people were saying on the Prince.org page and on Reddit. So like I said, nothing, I don't want to say it's a nothing burger, but it kind of is, unfortunately. But that's okay. That is still my connection with Prince and all of my other November 4th, twins. So he talked about our birthday in his song. And so that, to me, that's good enough. So, going back to the lyrics, then he says, he goes back to the stand, all the critics love you in New York. And he says that over and over. And he says, body don't want to quit. Got to get another hit. And so I don't know if he's talking about music, drugs, or sex here. But if I would dare to guess, I would say probably music and sex mixed together, because it's Prince. So I'm just going to theorize. But then I think it probably is sex, because the next two stanzas, he's talking about masturbating. Like, he pretends like he's a cop and he's saying, yes, we're certain he's definitely masturbating. Like, he's getting caught by a cop masturbating. Because he says, what you looking at, punk? Look out, all you hippies. You ain't as sharp as me. It ain't about tripping, but the sexuality. Turn it up. And so the cadence that he has in the song is very reminiscent of the Purple Music song. And this song makes me think that maybe this was like the sister song to Purple Music, because it really has like the same vibe to it almost. And so finally he says, all the critics love you in New York. Take a bath, hippie. And he says, all the critics love you in New York. And he, says that. And then he ends it by, saying New York over and over. New York, New York, New York. And it kind of, fades out. And that's pretty much the end of the song. So it's one of those songs that, like I said, he does a lot of repeating in the song. And it's a song that you can listen to and be like, oh, okay, that's a cool song. But once again, for me, it just never really just stood out. There's obviously better songs on the 1999 album than this one. But I kind of felt like it fits the 1999 album. But I really do think that Purple Music, if I'm being honest, is a better song. And I hate to even say that, but it's true. But you know what? No, I don't hate to say that, because I need to stop beating myself up about that, because sometimes I get on my podcast and I'm like, oh, I shouldn't say that I don't like this song, because, we have some of our, our lovely Prince brothers and sisters that are like, never have a Prince song that they didn't like. There's some, and then there's others who are kind of more honest, such as myself and others. They're like, oh, you know what? I really didn't care for that song as much. So when I get on here, I'm just like, do I need to be completely honest and say that I'm not a big fan of this song? So I will say that I'm not the best, huge fan of this particular song. And the only reason why I even really like listening to it is because my birthday is in it, if I'm being totally honest. But outside of that, like I said, it just doesn't really stick out to me. And I really think that maybe, just maybe, Purple Music would have done better on on the 1999 album than this song. But like I said, I don't want to completely discount it. It's a good song, and it's a bop. It's a vibe. So if you're living under a rock and you haven't heard it, go check it out. And I will probably put it up on the Facebook page at some point. But yeah, that is it. That is all. That's my review of All the Critics Love You in New York. And if you like this podcast, please think about subscribing to the YouTube channel, because I've got some exciting things coming up there. I've got some more episodes coming out too, and I'll be in touch with those who have expressed interest in wanting to come on the podcast and talk about Prince. So be looking for me to DM you or contact you in some way to talk to you about that. So I'm going to go ahead and sign off for tonight, you guys. Thank you so much for all your love and support. Peace and be wild, and may you live to see the dawn. Bye.